Family, what's good with you? It's your boy 2A in LA, and as always, fam, anything I say in this episode, prior episodes, and future episodes is just my personal opinion. You shouldn't take it as fact. You shouldn't take it as law. Always do your own homework and come up with your own conclusions. Right about now, fam, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and tap that like button for your boy. All right. If you're new to the channel, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and subscribe. I think you are going to enjoy the content, and if you don't, you can always unsubscribe later. And if you are an existing subscriber, fam, thank you so very much. You are the reason why I do what I do. All right, let's get this episode rolling. So look, fam, there's been 5 million videos already put out about the Supreme Court's most recent favorable ruling for the 2A community. Primarily, this is the New York case, New York Rifle and Pistol Association case, whereby which they were suing because basically New York City's concealed carry laws are unconstitutional, and quite frankly, they very much mirror the concealed carry laws here in California, whereby an additional standard in most states, 43 other states, you want a concealed carry permit, you go down, you apply, there's usually a nominal fee, and providing there are no major issues relative to your application, generally they will issue you a permit. And I'm talking about the same kind of stuff that will prevent you from buying a firearm, right? You are a convicted felon. You have a restraining order against you. You're of a certain age. There's no other general issues with you. Basically, if you have the ability to buy and own a firearm in most states, 43 of the 50 states, then you, generally speaking, have the ability to get a CCW permit. That is not the case in California. That's not historically been the case in California. In California, if you wanted a CCW permit, and I shouldn't say California because I don't think that's accurate. California is made up of a lot, like every state, it's made up of a lot of different cities, a lot of different counties, right? And so in some cities and some counties, it is that way. In other cities and counties, it historically has not been that way. And I live in Los Angeles City and Los Angeles County, and historically, you could not get a CCW permit unless you showed cause above and beyond that of the everyday citizen. And usually you're talking about people who carry like large sums of money or jewelry, or people who have a direct threat against them in the form of a stalker or something like that, or a celebrity or something like that. Very, very difficult, y'all. It was almost impossible. So there were very few CCW permits allowed in LA City and LA County. What this ruling has done is it says you can no longer do that. If a person qualifies, you can't restrict their limit by making them show some additional cause above the common citizen. That the Second Amendment is a right, it is not a privilege, and you don't have the ability to, and preventing people from bearing firearms is a violation of our Second Amendment. Now, that in and of itself is a huge win. I'll get to what California and New York are trying to do to combat that in a minute, post this decision, but that was a huge win. But what was a bigger win was the verbiage written by Clarence Thomas in this particular case of how you go about determining whether or not it is a violation of your Second Amendment rights. And essentially, without getting down, I'm not an attorney, and without trying to get down into the weeds too much, and there are a lot of videos out there that do get down to the weeds if you want to do that. Essentially, what a lot of these states had used to prevent people from getting CCWs was this two-step process, whereby which, in addition to just whether or not it fit the text of the of the Second Amendment, it went beyond that to a secondary test, and the verbiage was different, a little different state to state, but basically it got to deal with whether it went against the good of the government, etc. And so that second step is where a lot of the laws got tripped up and eliminated people from being able to carry CCWs. And basically, Clarence Thomas basically said in the majority opinion that, look, there's no two steps. there's no additional step. An additional step is one step too many. And that's almost verbatim, right? Basically, the Second Amendment is what it is. It provides the people, individual people, the right to keep and bear arms, and bear arms means outside of the house, and that's the test. That's the test. If you're going to infringe on that, then you have to show that there is some historical context for doing so around the time that the Second Amendment in the Constitution was established. So, in other words, you can't, it's not the last 100 years or anything like that. That's what a lot of people in New York and California were saying. Oh, well, these laws have been on the books for 100 years. So that, no. At the time that the Constitution was formed, if we're trying to judge intent, then we need to look back at that, right? And so what that means, because otherwise, what would happen is, if I wanted to prevent people from carrying, and a law was established that said you couldn't carry, and then that law was in place for 10 years, the government then could look back and say, hey, look, it's been on the books for 10 years, therefore it doesn't, no. It does, a nice try, but it doesn't work like that, right? So here's what's monumental about the verbiage in the decision. That two-step test that Clarence Thomas basically eliminated, that is what all of these laws out here in California have been based on. The handgun roster is based on that. The NFA is based on that. The assault weapons ban is based on that. The magazine capacity limits are based on that. They're all based on this secondary measurement that Clarence Thomas and the Supreme Court has basically said does no longer exist. So they overruled the lower court's decision in the New York case, and they basically granted all of these other cases and sent them back to the district courts and said, you guys ruled wrong. Now that we've shown you how you're supposed to rule, rethink your decision, and basically don't let it come back here again. And so I think it is only a matter of time before Californians have similar rights that the other 43 states currently have. I think the handgun roster will fall. And the handgun roster, y'all, essentially in California, says if you want to buy a handgun in the state of California, it has to be on this approved list. If it's not on this approved list, then you can't buy it. And all the guns on that approved list are dated and old and were grandfathered in. And California basically thought they were going to strong arm the gun industry to make the gun industry come up with these unrealistic standards in their manufacturing process that really, at the end of the day, wouldn't have done anything. And the gun industry just said, nah, we're not going to do it. And then I think California was okay with that because they felt like, okay, well, if you don't do it, then the guns in California are going to dry up. Well, that hasn't happened. People are buying guns at record numbers still, right? And the only kind of workaround there was if you bought the gun private party, you can buy it, which is how a lot of the guns that you see in my collection I've gathered. The problem with that is there is 100% to 150% markup, a 50% to 150% markup on all of these guns. So the $500 gun is going to end up costing you probably $1,500. You know, the $1,000 gun is going to end up costing you $2,500. The $2,000 gun is going to end up costing you $4,000. So it's like that, right? and puts Californians at extreme disadvantage. So I think the handgun roster is going to be going. And I think that is one of the biggest criticisms that people in California have, even more so than CCW, because we don't have access to the firearms that everybody else does. And you know what? You know who we also don't have access to that other people have? Criminals. We don't have access to the same firearms that the criminals have. So we're already at a disadvantage. And so, look, fam, I think the California handgun roster is going to be gone. I think that the magazine ban limit that forces us to have low capacity magazine, not standard capacity, low capacity magazines, because that's what 10 rounds are in most firearms. So I think that's going to be gone. I think the assault weapon ban that has us putting these ridiculous grips on stuff, the fin grips and no vertical foregrip, I think that again does nothing. I think that's gone. And so in all of these cases, the good thing is all of these cases have been pending. So now that this decision has come down, they were just kind of on hold until this decision came down. Well, now this come down in a short amount of time. I'm thinking probably in the next 60 days or so, 60 to 90 days, you're going to see some movement in a lot of these cases. Now, California, New York, you got to give them a credit, I suppose. They're not going to go down without a fight. So on relative to concealed carry, there are tons of laws in both states, relative to everything. There are tons of laws in both states that are starting to get signed off by the legislature. I think these laws are going to wind up in court. They're going to be deemed unconstitutional, and they're going to get struck down too, but it's just more game playing. What they're doing now with the CCW is they're trying to, since you don't have to have this good cause or extra cause standard, now they're trying to raise the bar relative to the moral standard by looking at people's social media and things like that. That's problematic because there is supposed to be no subjective criteria. And that is the epitome of subjective. If you're looking at people's social media to judge their moral fiber, unless you have video of them breaking the law in some kind of way, then what? Well, how are you going to judge that? It's going to be all subjective, right? So that's problematic. And then they are raising sensitive places, like where you can carry a firearm. Everything is a sensitive place. Really, before, it was more like federal buildings or state buildings, voting polls and things of that nature. Now they're trying to make all private businesses off limits, all public transportation off limits. Nobody can have a gun within 1,000 yards of a school or something like that. Well, how do you know how many schools there are? How do you know? You just be driving by, you get pulled over for a traffic stop, and you're next to a school. So I gotta Google my do a Google search and map out my route to go to the grocery store but I can't take it into the grocery store because it's a private bit. They're basically trying to eliminate the validity of a CCW. Okay, we're going to give you one, but you're really not going to be able to carry it anywhere, your firearm anywhere, because everywhere is going to either be off limits or close to or approximately off limit, and you're going to become a felon. And that's really what's going to happen. A lot of innocent people who are trying to do the right thing are going to get caught up and put in situation, and then they're going to sue, and they're probably going to win. So, fam, look, this is not. It's a huge win for the Second Amendment community. You guys know how I feel about gun control laws. I think the advent of gun laws and the history of gun control laws in this country have been racist. The earliest gun control laws on the books were enacted to prevent freed slaves from owning firearms, and that was the case all the way up into the 1970s when Ronald Reagan instituted some of the first gun control laws on the books here in California to disarm the Black Panthers. And so, as somebody who has only essentially been a free man now for the last 50 years. I'm not trying to be disarmed. So that's one thing, right? And then I would say above and beyond that, I don't think they work. I don't think they work. The most gun deaths in this country are the result of suicides and are the result of urban violence, right? And so relative to suicides, which make up about 65% of the gun deaths in the country, that's a mental health issue. We need to be addressed. If we want to eliminate gun deaths by suicide, and suicide deaths that are non-gun related are high as hell too. So we have a mental health problem in the country that needs to be addressed. And instead of the politicians and the media pumping people up so much about, oh, it's guns, no, what's the underlying problem? I saw a shirt one day, like I said, if you think guns kill people, you think pencils misspell words. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. It's the person behind the gun that's the issue. So if you really want to fix what's causing all of these gun deaths, we need to address the mental health crisis we have in this country, and then violence in urban communities among criminals, generally speaking, is where the lion's share of the other deaths take place. When you have communities where there's a huge wealth disparity, where there's far more have-nots than the haves, and that gap continues to grow, where there's not access to quality education, where there's not access to upward mobility, where you don't have access to quality health care, people become desperate. They become disenfranchised, and oftentimes the things that follows are crime, drugs, gangs. And because you're in these urban centers where people sit on top of one another, you have a lot of violence that takes place there. But again, the guns aren't the problem. If they weren't using guns, they'd be using some other means, right? And so what we really need to do is address the disparities that continue to separate us as a society. We need to find opportunities to allow people to get a quality education, to get quality health care, to seek out careers that allow them to earn a livable wage. And I think if you did that, you'd see the crime and the gun violence decline. But politicians don't want to talk about that because they don't know how to fix that. What they do think they can do is slap on another gun control law and make everybody happy temporarily until the next tragedy comes around. And then they're going to say we need another law, and then another, and another, and another. And that's the cycle we've been going through now in this country for, I don't know, the past 30 years or so. And so 30, 40 years. So look, fam, that's kind of my take on things. I am pleased about the Supreme Court opinion. I do think it is going to radically improve the landscape for Second Amendment advocates over time. But it's not over. It's not a wrap by any means. We still need to, be aware, be advocates, be vocal about our Second Amendment rights. And fam, look, for the first time in a long time, I'm very hopeful about what California is going to look like from a Second Amendment perspective. Yeah, we'll see. All right. Look, fam, that's it for this episode. Until next time, as always, take care of one another and peace.